Hey guys, Zulkaris here, and welcome back to another episode of Messing Around with Zulk. I got a cold, so my voice sounds a bit stuffy, but today I'm doing a reaction video, another one. So I was looking for videos to watch while I ate, and I stumbled across this one. The best homebrew D&D classes you need to try by Arlen Trick. Now, this is the first full video of this guy that I watched, and I did watch the full thing. I watched it, got inspired to make this reaction video to it, and as you can see, I did enjoy the content. So, yeah, this is the full video. This is the first full video from this guy that I've watched. It's pretty good actually. And the keyword here is full video. I have encountered a lot of his shorts during my time watching YouTube. And so I think his shorts are pretty good. I mean, they're fun. And yeah, and now I'm here. When I watched this video, I wanted to talk a bit about some of my way of, I guess, making characters in D&D where they don't really fit any subclass. Hang on one sec. Had to clear my nose for a bit. But yeah, so watching this, I thought about ways I would go about making a character if I didn't think any of the existing classes in 5e D&D fit what I was trying to do. And by the way, this is 5e D&D, by the way. Just thought I'd make it clear. And I thought it'd be fun to just watch this video again on camera this time and just talk about how I would go about achieving similar character concepts without homebrew. So here we go. Also, the without homebrew is with an asterisk there. I will explain that later.
So, now that there's a new version of D&D, how many classes are they adding? None, actually. In fact, they kind of removed an option because artificers aren't even in the base player's handbook. Well, that's stupid as fuck. Barbarians, bards, clerics, druids, all the other ones except for ranger. Each of these classes fill a very specific purpose and role in D&D, and are all fun to play in their own right, but at least sometimes, I mean for me anyways, there's a desire to play something that doesn't quite fit within any of these pre-existing molds. So, where does it leave us? I mean sure, you could reflavor the aesthetic of one of these pre-existing classes to try and achieve what you're going for, or you could just play a homebrewed class.
So here's the first thing I want to say, and which where I will explain what I mean by no homebrew. So there is a third way to achieve a character which doesn't really fit any of the existing classes, and that is through multiclassing. And not just normal multiclassing, because in a lot of cases the DM would ask why you are multiclassing. Well, not many cases, more in heavier roleplay oriented games, the DM might ask you to explain in narrative why you are multiclassing and how you are multiclassing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking strictly mechanics. One of the things I have noticed is that, well, for one, this was an earlier complaint before like each class in D&D 5e got like a ton of subclasses for it. But in the earlier days of D&D 5e, I noticed one complaint was that the classes were too samey. Like there were only so many ways to play a fighter or so many ways to play a sorcerer. And that was one of the complaints I heard back then. I don't hear that complaint anymore now. And and that's where my idea came in. See, D&D 5e's class system was at one point kind of restrictive when you don't consider the ton of subclasses, but even now I guess you can consider it kind of restrictive because a lot of the subclasses are spread out in 10 or 20, not 10, not 20, 10 different source books and adventure books. So it's still kind of restrictive, except if you multiclass. Yes, multiclassing is an optional rule, and Not all DMs might allow it, but if you do, I highly recommend you as the DM. I highly recommend you allow multi-classing in your games because you can create so many different characters, so many unique ability combos with multi-classing. It's not perfect, but it can give you like a ton of different combinations which should cover like 80% of all characters you might want to play, all concepts you want to try. And here's another thing. Here's the thing. Now, like I was saying, in more narrative focused groups, the DM might ask you, oh, that is unfortunate. I just lost power and I also just lost internet. Well, I guess I can't do this video until my power comes back. Well, I can at least finish talking about this part and then I'll pause recording. I guess I'll pause recording and continue when I get internet back. So, as I was saying, right, in more narrative focused groups, the DM might ask you to explain in the story how and why you're multi-classing, in which case it becomes harder to do this. But if your DM doesn't really care that much about the hows and whys, here's one thing you can do. Let's say you want to play a character that doesn't fit any of the classes exactly. You can discard their lore, discard the class lore, and basically multi-class, following the multi-class rules, of course. Basically multi-class the character and treat the combination, treat the build, so to speak, as its own class. An example of this is my mercenary class, which is not actually a class. It's the class in quotation marks that one of my first D&D characters use. And the concept of that class is that it's a jack of all trades. Well, the concept of that build, I should say, is that it's a jack of all trades, master of none. It can fill any role the party might want, but not as well as a dedicated character for that role. Which means that this character can offer a good deal of versatility to any group. And here's how I did it. I was a arcade trickster rogue, 17 levels of that, and 2 levels of life cleric for better healing and spell slot progression, and 1 level of fighter for equipment proficiencies and fighting styles. And what I got was a very tanky rogue that had good defenses, good offensive capabilities, and versatility with skills and spellcasting. And it can also heal. Not as good as the cleric might do, but can heal in a pinch. And that's what that class was supposed to be. That character was supposed to do. That character can't do anything in a pinch. Yeah, you want a cleric to heal you. So this character is not that good. But if for whatever reason your cleric is out of commission, well, you have this character to run over and heal the cleric. So the cleric can start raising the dead characters up. If you needed to hold a choke point, this character would go there, hold the choke point with the fighter and the paladin, and do pretty well. Well, not as well as the fighter, barbarian, or paladin, but better than you'd expect a rogue to. And speaking of rogue, you have a rogue to scout, but scouting can be dangerous. Well, it's not dangerous if this character goes there with the rogue as backup. So yeah, that's what I mean. There is no one class that fits that character, the character I just described. But by multi-classing and treating the multi-class build as its own thing, I basically created a new class or played a character that's different from all the classes. And that is what I'm about to do here. This guy is going to talk about various homebrew classes that you can play to fulfill certain aesthetics, certain character types that may not fit any existing core class. And I'm gonna tell you how to achieve a similar character concept, a similar character idea using multiclassing. Now, I am not going to give you builds here, and there's a reason for that. See, the thing is, when you're multiclassing to fit a character concept and discarding all the class lore and just basically using multiclassing to create your character the way you envision that character, what classes you pick, how deep you go into each class, what feats you take, what stats you take, like what's the level splits, what's the subclass, stuff like that is going to vary wildly based on the exact kind of character you have in your head. So even if I give if like a multi-class idea for, okay, use this multi-class idea if you want to play a boxer, exactly what kind of abilities you imagine your fantasy boxer to have, that might change entirely how you want to build him. And that is why I'm not going to give specific builds. I'm just going to throw out some general ideas and concepts that might ideas and classes that you might want to mix and match together to achieve the concept you have in your head. The again, like I said, the exact levels and the spell selections and stuff, that is on you. That you have to do that based on exactly what you want your character to do. So going back to the mercenary example, well, if I did not create the mercenary multi-class build to fit my specific idea for what I wanted my character to do, then I would not have been able to tell you this is like this minute details of what the build is. I would not have been able to tell you stuff like Arcade Trickster 17 or Arcade Trickster X, Life Cleric 2, Fighter 1. I would not have been able to tell you the subclasses and the level splits for the mercenary class if I didn't make it to serve one specific character and one specific build. If I wanted to give a more generalized idea of a mercenary, I probably would have said to try fighter and rogue. So that's how it's gonna work. I probably would have said based on if you wanted magic or not to try hexblade or paladin or like combine fighter and rogues spellcasting subclasses together to create like some kind of a spellblade mercenary. That's something I would have said. Again, if like I said, if the mercenary build I have in my head wasn't so closely tailor-made to what specific character I play. So yeah, that's why I'm not gonna be giving you exact character builds here, and instead I'm just going to give general ideas of how to mix different abilities different classes might have in order to get what you want. And with that, I am going to pause recording here, and when I get my power back, I'll get back to it. See you then. Power spec. Let's get back to it.
I'm certainly not telling you to try and go away and homebrew a D&D class from scratch, because that's a gargantuan amount of work and time and intelligence that I certainly don't have, so there's no way I could tell you to do that. Primarily because trying to figure out if something that you've created is balanced and thoroughly play tested and again balanced is a lot of work. But luckily for me at least, there's way too many brilliant minds in this community who have put together some incredibly detailed and innovative classes that I think are worth talking about. So because of this, I've curated a list of homebrew D&D classes that I've either trialed myself or have played alongside that I feel can be adapted into any play group, with of course the DM and group's permission. Starting off with the Witch. Which witch is which? I don't care. There's several versions of witches available out there on the internet for D&D, but my favourite variant is from Mage Hand Press, simply due to the amount of flavour and depth available that just ties in with my preferred witch aesthetic. It really just fits the old crone standing over a cauldron doing witchy witch stuff, and I love that. Now, you may be thinking another spellcaster in D&D seems unnecessary, but this iteration on the class group of ranged damage magic users has a much heavier emphasis on hexes and manipulation-based spells, which I think is a very fun twist to the other options available. In terms of the overall aesthetic of a witch, rather than being blessed with their magical abilities, it's actually a class feature that witches are cursed and have been afflicted by hateful arcana that is torturing them, and they're generally perceived as outcasts and feared by the general public. I'm not making this up, you quite literally need to choose what form your curse takes as well. Want a free produce flame cantrip? All that'll cost you is your entire body being severely burnt and embers of magic that burn underneath your skin permanently. Seems like a good deal. In a very Sabrina the Teenage Witch sense, witches are also rarely seen without their familiars, which again just ticks the flavor box that I absolutely adore. You also have access to a much more extensive and exotic familiar list, which is also cool. In addition to all this, you'll get access to a unique witch spell list, a hex spell list, have extensive access to ritual casting, and you can cackle as a bonus action to extend the length of a hex. How does a witch cackle? What in the world was that? And just to round off the rest of the witch aesthetics, you can brew potions in a cauldron, engage in witchcrafting, but not to be confused with witchcraft, it's just quite literally a different crafting system for witches. You can fly around on a broom, enchant and create temporary witches' huts, and form and create your own witches' coven, and those who are inducted into your coven get access to some of your spells when they're within range of you. Literally every part of this class has been thought out to the minute degree, and running around cackling at the local townsfolk and bandits and being rewarded for it is something that you just need to experience. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. For me at least, the ability to control things with one's mind is just...
Yes, so that's where the witch entry ends. And by the way, I should clarify right now, this video that I'm doing, it's not meant to be a diss on homebrew classes, no. Or like these, I'm not trying to knock the classes he talks about here. They sound pretty cool. I haven't personally went and read it because I don't really want to play. I don't really intend on playing these homebrew classes, but they sound cool. And if they tickle your fancy, you should go check them out yourself. No, I'm basically talking about like an alternative. I don't disagree with anything he says here. I'm just bringing up an alternative method. And because again, the whole spiel I went on at the start of the video explaining why I'm doing this and how I'm doing this, I'll just say this, that I am basing this less on mechanics and more on aesthetics for similar reasons that I talked about at the start of the video. So for a witch, well, it sounds to me like as a witch, when I think of it, I imagine like, just like he said, hexes, curses, cauldrons, and spells. And if I wanted to do this without relying on homebrew, I think based on what exactly you want the witch to do, so like, do you want a more supportive or a damage dealing witch? Do you want it to transform into creatures and stuff? That kind of shit. I think the best combo would be either Warlock Bard or Warlock Sorcerer. I could also see Druid being a good option, but not as much. I do remember I tried to create a witch character that's more in line with the fairy tale witch, and I didn't succeed very well. I just went full level 20 moon druid, where all the druid spells were flavored as being arcana instead of, druid magic. So that's how I did my witch character, but that was a long time ago, and I don't think if I wanted to make a witch character now, I don't think I'd approach it the same way. But yeah, I think for a witch, Warlock and Sorcerer or Warlock and Bard would be well. Here's why. With Bard, you get a bunch of support and control spells. Your enchanted witch's hut can be something like Liamon's tiny hut. And hold on, is instant fortress a spell or a magic item? Let's see. Fortress. Fortress of some blah blah blah, 20 feet from each side. How long does this last? Every 7 days for a year makes it permanent. Okay, so yeah, I guess Mighty Fortress is something. It's oh, it's wizard only. Never mind. What about shit. Border Guidance Magnificent Mansion. Bard. So yeah, I guess you can use these spells. If you go Warlock Bard, I guess you can use these spells for a Witch's Hut. And there's also, by the way, Instant Fortress is, I just figured out right now, Instant Fortress is an item, not a spell. But yeah, with Bard, like I was saying, you can reflavor a lot of bardic stuff, like bardic inspiration and cutting words from some Bard subclasses. College of Lore lets you pluck spells from other classes into Bard, or Song of Rest, Counter Charm. These things can be reflavored to be Witch's Protections or Witch's Hexes. And Warlock and its Warlock Invocations can give you access, especially if you go Pact of the Tomb and take the Ritual Caster feat. You can probably also do the ritual casting Korod thing, drawing magical circle type witchcraft as well. And of course, Eldritch Blast and Hex. It's in the name. But yeah, if you take spells like Bestow Curse, I think it's called. Yeah, Bestow Curse, Contagion, Hex, etc. And reflavor some of the Bard abilities, you can probably get a pretty convincing witch character with Warlock Bard. Warlock Sorcerer if you want more damage and potentially polymorph. But the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm leaning towards Warlock Bard. Probably more Bard than Warlock. But yeah, that's probably how I would go about. And like if you were my player and said I want to play a witch, and like you're a new D&D player who knows what multiclassing is, but isn't like super deep into the number crunching and stuff, then I would probably recommend. That's also another angle I'm coming at this from. Like I'm pretending that each of these classes are like concepts a player has brought to me and I'm DMing. And this is how I would advise them to make this kind of character. So if you were my player and you wanted to play which character and I wasn't allowing homebrew classes, I would tell you to go and look into Warlock and Bard. Not picking either Warlock or Bard, but trying to figure out what combination of the two, what multi-class build you can make with these two classes to achieve the which idea that you want. So that would be my way of going about it. So, yeah.
The most desirable thing in the world.
One sec.
Every time I watch any...
Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that the multiclassing I'm talking about here is an extreme form of it. What do I mean? Well, each class in D&D 5e comes with its little lore section. We are ignoring that. Like you might be saying, when I talked about Warlock Bard, you might bring up Warlock Bard, but I don't want to cast spells with music and I don't want to be, I don't know, tied to a patron that's giving me magic. Because warlocks, as you know, in lore are basically like Cthulhu cultists in a way, where they make pacts with otherworldly beings and get their magic that way. And bards cast magic through their music and their performance. But here, I'm talking about an extreme version of multiclassing because I'm ignoring all that. Like I'm suggesting you multiclass wizard, oh not wizard, warlock with bard, but just like rewrite the class lore. You can't cast warlock magic because you made a pact. You did not make a pact here. You have warlock powers because you're a witch. That's it. You have bard powers, not because you can play the guitar really well, but because again, you're a witch. Now, this kind of extreme multiclassing that I have learned is not every DM's cup of tea. So, again, just like with homebrew classes, ask your DM before you spring this on top of them. But personally, I think it should at least be a bit easier to convince the DM to let you, uh, I don't know, homebrew class this way instead of using an actual third party homebrew class. It depends on the DM, just ask them. Um, and explain what you're trying to do here and why you're getting rid of all the classes, lore, and aesthetics and substituting them with your own. I want to believe that most DMs would be more inclined. Like, if the DM allows multi-classing to begin with, then I think they would be inclined to let you do shit like this more than just bringing in a new homebrew. So, yeah, you're continuing on with the video.
The X-Men movie, I'm convinced that I could conceivably move an object with my mind if I just use my sheer mental strength, and then my ADHD kicks in and I move on to the next activity. If you're not clear on the aesthetic of what a scion actually does, they're essentially an individual who has tapped into a special otherworldly force with the ability to actualize the power of their mind to accomplish impossible feats such as reading minds, lifting vast weights, and transcending physical limitations, which we'll get a bit more into briefly. If you've ever played any Mass Effect, you have psionic abilities in that game, just think of it like that. There's also a few Scion variants floating out across the web, but Kibbles Tasty definitely has the best version, and they're a pretty infamous D&D homebrewer because they're that good. So let's jump straight into some class features. Starting out at first level, you get access to your Scion archetype, which kind of ties in strongly with how you came to attain your psionic abilities. And there is a lot to choose from here. There's options ranging from elemental affinities, dangerous branches of psionics, meditative archetypes, and my personal favorite, Shaper's Mind, which is a Scion that specializes in materializing the thoughts in their imagination and projecting it out into the world. You think it, you see it. Whichever archetype you choose will shape your psionic discipline, such as gaining access to telekinesis or telepathy. These archetypes also give you access to different passive abilities and skills that can be enhanced by psi points, which functionally work the same as monks' key points or chi points, or what they're called focus points now, we'll just go with that. To bolster all of this, there's unique psionic spells you get to choose from, access to astral guardians, and starting at 14th level, you can allow your mind to run wild and let an astral army spring forth into reality. Isn't that cool? Now, go live your best Mass Effect or Magneto life and get your psionics on. What could be more fun than playing as a greedy...
One sec, I need to clear my nose again. Yeah, I got a cold. Okay, so on the topic of scions or mystics, I guess, I this is kind of hard to do, really, because psionics are something completely divorced from magic, but also not, because it's both, like, it works like magic, but it's not magic. So that's kind of iffy, and it's kind of iffy if the DM will even allow psionics to be a thing in their world. And so, again, DM discretion, ask your DM before playing a Scion. But assuming all that is okay, I would say that outside of using a homebrew class or a third party class, I guess, one way I would advise you to play your psionic character, like as pretending that you're one of my players and you're coming to me as the DM. I'm the DM, and you're coming to me with your idea for a psychic character, a scion character, and asking me how to play that. And this is how I would advise. I would advise you to look into Warlock again, yes, and Sorcerer. More Sorcerer than Warlock this time. I remember that there are some Sorcerer subclasses that deal more with mental stuff. For Warlock, there's also the Gulag, I guess, Great Old One Warlock, which is supposed to be a Cthulhu flavored Warlock, but with how their abilities work, they can, I think, uh, double as a Scion. The problem with psionics is that it's such a wide concept. You can do it with a bunch of different subclasses and classes combos. So I would actually ask you for more detail, like what exactly you want your character to do, what flavor of psychic powerhouse they are in your head. And based on that, if you want a more caster oriented scion, then yeah, a warlock sorcerer, look into those. Soul Knife Rogue can also work. And there's also, what's it called? Psionic Fighter. There's those things. It all depends on what you want to do. So I would recommend looking into those classes: Warlock, Sorcerer, Psionic Fighter, and Soul Knife Rogue. Look into these four classes and subclasses and see if you can mix and match one or more of them to get the kind of scion you want. And telekinesis, telepathy, I believe there are some subclasses that do that. Let me check real quick. Warlock, sorcerer. Uh, so here's the great old one. You get yeah, so Awakened Mind gives you telepathy and it's at first level, so taking a dip here won't cause too much trouble. And you also have Thought Shield and stuff like this, so that can be flavored as psionics. And there's also Aberrant Mind, which is again psionic spells. See, you have psionic spells right here. And here, telepathic speech. Wait, this is the same thing as Awakened Mind. And right? Yeah, I think it is. Well, another way you can do that, telekinesis. Wait, I forgot telekinesis was an actual spell in D&D. So you have that to look forward to. You also have a feat, if I recall correctly, that can work well with a scion character. Where is it? D&D Beyond is really helpful for looking up stuff. Yeah, telepathic. You like the mage hand cantrip and can cast it without verbal or somatic components. Yeah. So you can take this feat for telekinesis and wait until 5th level for wait until access to 5th level spells for better telekinesis. And that's one way you can play a Scion character. Again, Psionics is such a broad concept. I can even see some classes of Monk being able to be reflavored into Scions. But yeah, the main ones I would say is look into Warlock and Sorcerer for a psionic character. Moving on.
Streets or Magneto life and get your psionics on. What could be more fun than playing as a gritty, street-smart thug who only knows one thing and one thing only, and that thing is bare-knuckle brawling? Yes, I'm aware that monks exist, but there's never been a monk subclass that's really matched the vibe of, the Rocky Balboa type, or the guy that gets into street fights and just wins everything. Pugilists are awesome. Pugilists are described as living rough and tumble lives that leaves them full of determination and recklessness, either from overconfidence or desperation. Because of this, in a fight, they can channel this strength of character to dig deep and fight off foes with greater strength of numbers, arms, or armor, more than anyone would ever conceive possible. Let me make this clear, there's nothing magical about this class at all. It's not an esoteric or mystical energy that flows through them, or any kind of god or patron, but just the result of determination forged over a lifetime of hardship with a never say die attitude. You can teach someone how to fight, but you could never teach someone how to be a pugilist. So, how does a pugilist actually play mechanically? Pretty much, unarmed strikes and improvised weapons are your best friends, and at level 1 you get access to replace one of your unarmed strikes with a d6 damage dice, which scales as you level. You also get access to these things called Moxie Points, which is just the coolest named thing ever, which allow you to do these kind of pugilist maneuvers of sorts, like hitting enemies additional times by using features like the old one too. The flavor of every class feature is just chef's kiss. Without a doubt, my favorite aesthetic part of this entire class is at 3rd level when you get access to your subclasses, which are quite literally referred to as fight clubs. Just this once, we can talk about Fight Club. So let's rapid fire through them real quick. There's the Arena Royale Fight Club, which is quite literally a WWE style fighting persona complete with crowd rousing and signature moves that can stun your target. You can't see me because I stunned you. There's the Bloodhound Bruisers Fight Club, which is a much more perceptive and detective style subclass that kind of improves your attention and kind of spotting your opponent's weaknesses and taking the upper hand when they're down. The Dog and Hound Fight Club, which is kind of similar to a Beastmaster subclass for a Ranger. Gives the pugilist a little canine animal, probably one that was in dogfights because that just aesthetically ties in with everything. The best one, the Piss and Vinegar Fight Club. This subclass focuses on insults and dirty tricks to distract and weaken your enemies, because of course it does. The Squared Circle Fight Club. It's a little bit less exciting, but this one focuses on different ways of grappling and pinning down your enemies. And lucky last, the Sweet Science Fight Club, which focuses on fighting smarter rather than using just brute force, which kind of goes against my whole persona, but it's there if you want it. You know what I've always found lacking in D&D in general?
Yes, so about the pugilist, I don't agree with him on one point, which is like there is no Rocky Balboa type monk. And I disagree because of this. See, just because monk is portrayed as this enlightened and mystic warrior, the kung fu master type, doesn't mean it has to be. Key points doesn't have to be literal key energy. You can reflavor key points as more like stamina points, or as the pugilist class put it, I guess, moxie points. You can reflavor that. And here's something I want to show you guys that makes a good pugilistic character. Open hand. Now, I know what you're saying. Open hand is the most key focused, right? Ultimate masters of martial arts combat, whether armed or unarmed, they learn techniques to push and trip their opponents, manipulate ki to heal damage to their bodies, and practice advanced meditation that can protect them from harm. Sounds like a Master Shifu type, right? Except it doesn't have to be. See, a lot of, when you strip away the lore and flavoring of the open hand class, you are left with one of the most brutal, barehanded boxer type classes there is in base D&D. Like, the open hand technique says you're manipulating enemy's ki, but you don't have to. You can just reflavor these effects as being dirty fighting. Like, look at the effects. Whenever you hit a creature with one of your attacks granted by flurry of blows, and about flurry of blows, it doesn't have to be a swift JoJo style, anime style attack. It can be reflavored as the old 1-2, like the guy said it was, like the guy talked about. So yeah, you can flavor a monk as a Street Fighter pugilist type. Like, succeed on a dexterity saving throw or not be knocked prone. That's a leg sweep. It must make a stay, or if it fails, it is pushed 15 feet away from you. Just imagine this thing, and reflavor this thing as you grabbing your target and throwing them at a table or something. It can take reactions until the end of your next turn, and giving them a clap to the side of the heads to stun them temporarily so that they can take reactions. Wholeness of body, where you heal HP, you can just reflavor it less as a meditation based regeneration and more like fighter's second wind. So if you really want to, you can take any, well, maybe not any, a lot of the monk subclasses and reflavor them, not like a enlightened martial arts master, but like a prodigy, a street brawler. I would also look into the tavern and brawler feat, but to see if that's what you need, that's what you want, but I wouldn't really, I don't think, so here's the thing, tavern brawler would be great for this from a flavor perspective or from a narrative perspective, but tavern brawler as a feat kind of sucks, so I can't in good faith recommend that to you, but it's there if you want it. And hey, maybe your DM will allow you to use improvised weapons that you have proficiency with due to tavern brawler as monk weapons. Though me having a homebrew NPC that kinda does that, I do realize that that can get kind of wild really fast. Maybe I have some limitations on it. But either way, speaking of Tavern Brawler, it also gives you some grapple options. And speaking of grapple options, that's where I'm going into the next part. See, fighters have a new fighting style since Tasha's. Optional fighting styles. Here it is, unarmed fighting. Your unarmed strikes can deal bludgeoning damage equal to 1d6 plus your strength modifier on a hit. If you aren't wearing any weapons or a shield, when you make the attack roll, the d6 becomes a d8. At the start of your turn, you can deal 1d4 bludgeoning damage to one creature grappled by you. So you can combine, like you can probably take 1 or 2 levels of fighter for action surge, probably. You can take a few levels of fighter with your monk now for going into this unarmed fighting style. Speaking of that, I want to check something real quick. I never thought about that. How does that interact with monk's martial arts? At first level, blah blah blah, and monk puppets, which you get the following benefits while you are unarmed, or you can use your dex instead of strength for the attack and damage rolls of your unarmed strikes and monk weapons in place of normal damage of your unarmed strikes and monk weapons. Yeah, I think what this means is that if you multi-class fighter with monk, or even just take a feat to grab the unarmed fighting style, you might be able to jump multiple levels of damage early on. You might be able to like hit as many times the monk can with d8 dice, which is just awesome. But yeah, that is one thing you can do. And that would be my advice to you if you want to play like a pugilist type. Look into monk, look into fighter, maybe even barbarian for rage if that suits your fancy. And Godspeed, I guess. It depends. Do you want strength based monk, or I guess con based monk? Because one other thing I think you can do is go one level of barbarian, one level of fighter, and then monk, so that you can have unarmored defense from barbarian and not need to worry about dex. No, wait, I am an idiot. I was thinking something completely wrong. Discard the last few things I was talking about. I just thought wrong because I forgot that you need whiz for monk saving throws. Never mind. Just stick with monk's unarmored fighting. Unarmored fighting. And speaking of stunning enemies, stuff like stunning strike and deflect missiles, like I said, a lot of the stuff that monk has, it doesn't have to be mystic. It can just be a determination or desperation or cunning. Like, think about it. Monks have evasion. You want to know who else has evasion? Rogues. If rogues with nothing magical about them can have evasion, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say a lot of the monk abilities, at least the early game ones, can be flavored as not being esoteric or mystical, you know? So yeah, if you want to play a pugilist, you can. I suggest you look into monk, fighter, and barbarian and see if you can mix and match those classes to get what idea you have for your character in your head.
General in their classes and subclasses. Pirates. And yes,
Oh, this is an ad.
Exist, but it's never fully scratched that entire itch for me.
I am
treasure hunting and ship
not going to talk about
drunken sea chanting.
pirates here.
You know what will?
But
Sync,
I will.
The sponsor of this video. Sync is a tool.
Hold on. I will play the sponsorship segment because I am reacting to his video wholesale. So I think it's the least I can do to give him some more sponsor watch time, I guess.
The full treasure hunting and ship sailing and drunken sea chanting that I've been looking for. But you know what will? Sync, the sponsor of this video. Sync is a 200 plus page supplement book filled with new mechanics and illustrations rendered in stunning pop traditional tattoo art by tattoo artist Sam Rusk. Inside the book, you'll find 4 brand new pirate-inspired subclasses, including the Mistbreaker Ranger, who wields ethereal harpoons that tether to their enemies. That's so cool. There's also the Spellskin Wizard, who quite literally uses the skin of their body as a spellbook because tattoos? Speaking of tattoos, there's also over 50 magic item tattoos that you can ritually apply to your character's skin for various effects, such as summoning weapons, gaining flight, or even summoning an ethereal ship. All of this was created by Johnny Stanton, Sam Rusk, and Riskavis in collaboration with the folk over at Hitpoint Press. There's so many great and talented people that have come together for this, it's actually incredible. Sync is genuinely the ultimate pirate and tattoo supplement for 5th edition D&D, and it's live on Kickstarter right now, so you can click on the link in my description. Now, back to the video.
I will leave a link to this video in my video's description. Go check it out. Give this guy some love. I should have mentioned this. If you haven't watched this video, I do recommend you watch it first.
Cooler than rising things from the dead? The correct answer is a lot of things, and I'd be really concerned if you said nothing. I have to admit, I've always loved the aesthetic of necromancy in fantasy forms, and although there are subclasses such as Wizard School of Necromancy, Druid Circle of Spores, or Oathbreaker Paladins because they can raise zombies and skeletons, all of these options have still left me feeling pretty unsatisfied in the necromancy department. Moser Red, apologies if I completely butchered the pronunciation of that name, has homebrewed a necromancer class that aims to address these glaring oversights by offering an all-encompassing necrotic spellcaster to tickle the fancy of the more grim-natured audience. So with this version of the necromancer, aesthetically, no matter the approach to combat, they seek to control life and death in all of its forms. Because of this, they have a natural knack for manipulating the life essences that flow in every living being, and is what drives each necromancer to commit their nefarious or honorable acts. Did you hear that? Honorable. Necromancers don't have to be evil. But it's sometimes more fun when they are, I get it. The easiest way of explaining how this version of a necromancer mechanically and flavor-wise works is through explaining their first level class ability, Vitality Shift. Vitality Shift allows you to touch a willing creature and siphon 4 times your necromancer level and add it to your own life pool, or vice versa, giving it back to them. You are quite literally the giver and taker of life. At 2nd level, you get access to your subclass or Necromantic Creed. Take that, new D&D Player's Handbook. Level 2, baby! You've got the Creed of the Departed, which essentially specializes in allowing you to raise undead minions. You've got the Creed of Siphon, which really hones down on that siphoning health ability and turns you into a more martial class. And then you've got the Creed of Tomes, which narrows you down the path even more so on spellcasting, giving you access to more spells, recovering spells during combat, and dealing more damage in general. Across all of these creeds, you'll get access to some unique necromancer spells, the ability to do seances to communicate with the dead, and a heck of just way more creepy stuff. Your DM might even thank you for playing as a necromancer, because when you inevitably kill their favorite NPC,
Nope.
you can just raise them from the dead and have them accompany the party.
Nope.
Problem solved. Sure. Well,
And before I continue, I need to take a small bathroom break. I will be back with more info on the necromancer because I have a lot to talk about that class and how you can play as the more, I don't know, life-stealing necromancer type, vampiric necromancer type without needing a homebrew class. I'll be back. Alright, I am back. So, as I was saying, the necromancer. So here's the thing. Firstly, if you are unhappy with how the necromancer works in D&D 5e, it's probably because you can't really have an army of undead. And I am not going to tell you how to do that. Because 1, I don't think there's a good way to do that. And 2, because you don't actually want to do that. Having like a lot of other summoned creatures on the battlefield grinds games down to a halt. So I would strongly consider you to not try and raise like 10 skeletons, okay? But nothing is stopping you from having 1 or 2 powerful undead, and there is something for it. There's Create Undead. I think that's the spell. Yeah, here we go. Create Undead, which is a cleric spell. Nice. Cleric, Warlock, and Wizard. This is what I was looking for because I have an idea of how you can play a more life and death control necromancer that it puts debilitating spells that debuff your enemies to the ground and siphon life and stuff like that. There is a way to play that without needing an entire homebrew class. And it's surprisingly not the Necromancer Wizard. And because of course. No, if you want to play Necromancer, I would recommend looking into Divine Soul Sorcerer. And I'll explain why. See, this was not my idea, by the way. This was I watched this in a YouTube D&D video a long time ago, so I don't remember what channel it's from. But there they talked about playing a more dark and edgy necromancer with control over life and death. And the way they went about making a character like that was with sorcerer, and I'll tell you how. See, the cleric spell list, as you can see over here, has a lot of weird necromancy spells like this. There's also Wither and Bloom, which I think is a sorcerer spell. I know wizards get it, but can sorcerers also get it? Yeah, look at that. Sorcerer also has it. So, the reason I said Divine Soul is because of this one thing. Your link to the Divine allows you to learn spells from the Cleric class. So, the Cleric class has a lot of life and death type spells. Healing spells, and the resurrection spells, and even animate dead and create undead, which are the main bread and butter of a necromancer in D&D. Cleric has all of that, and as a sorcerer, and you get access to all of it via Divine Soul. So this stuff like Inflict Wounds, Cure Wounds, Bane, these things can let you act out as a necromancer. Just pretend you're not a divine soul, but rather someone who learned the art of necromancy to the point where they gained access to this kind of power. A lot of this can be reflavored. That's the draconic bloodline. No, that's just the divine soul. Yeah, all of these divine soul abilities can be reflavored as necromancy abilities. That is what I would suggest you do. And there is another thing that you have now, a new meta magic option. Transmuted spell. When you cast a spell that deals a type of damage from the following list, you can spend a sorcery point to change that damage type to one other of the listed types. Acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, thunder. So you can use transmuted spell to like change a lot of the classic fire type sorcerer blast spells into a more necromancy themed acid spells. Maybe you can even ask your DM to allow you to change them to necrotic damage. But if they don't, you can still use acid or cold and call it a day. Like draining the life energy and making the enemies cold. So cold damage. Or acid damage being reflavored as anti-life damage. You know? Even though that would be necrotic damage, still, like I said, you can swap them out for cold and acid in a pinch. So yeah, that's how you can play as a necromancer. You gain access to a lot of spells that allow you to do necromancy type things if you just describe them that way. And you do that via Divine Soul Sorcerer.
Gate 3 set a pretty high precedent with the likes of Karlach, in which can literally play as a demon from hell, and that's all well and good, but that doesn't really translate into a D&D class all that smoothly. Well, unless of course you play as Matt Koval's Illrigger. To summarize them simply, in every conceivable way, Illriggers are the polar opposite of what a paladin represents, serving the lawful evil spectrum of the alignment chart and quite literally coming from hell. Serving as devout knights of the Nine Hells, they fuel their powers with infernal conduits, special fighting styles, and they can use their spell slots to put seals on targets that deal necrotic damage, because of course they can. To tie in with the hellishly intimidating nature of your Illrigger, at level 1 you'll get access to a class feature which allows you to change any dice roll relating to persuasion, deception, and intimidation to an 8 as a minimum. I mean, if I were talking to someone who'd quite literally come from hell to do a devil's bidding, it'd be pretty hard not to be persuaded or intimidated or terrified. Somewhat similar to the Necromancer we just covered, at level 1 you get access to a pool of dice that you can use to either give hit points to a friendly creature or siphon hit points from enemy creatures. To further tie in with the hellish nature of your Illrigger, instead of subclasses you'll gain access to diabolic contracts. Each of these relates to a different archdevil that your character would serve under, so kind of think of them just like Warlock patrons if you're not following along. And these Archdevil options are the Shadow Master. If you choose this Archdevil, you get access to guerrilla combat and proficiencies in things like stealth. You'll also get extra fighting styles, and at higher levels, you become invisible when using your seals, which is cool, I guess. There's Painkiller, which is the most offensive option you can pick. You'll get proficiency in heavy armor, a very offensive spell list, and you're just much more strong and durable in general. And finally, the Architect of Ruin, which kind of more so focuses on your spells and diversity in the spells that you can cast, so much more on the Arcana route of things. Regardless of which Archdevil you serve under, you do get access to 5 brand new Illrigger spells, which are really cool as well. I'm really only scratching the surface on everything this class has to offer, and if you're familiar at all with the intellectual brilliance of Matt Colville, you'll just know that every avenue of this class has been thought out meticulously and carefully and perfectly crafted, so I really encourage you to check it out because it's so unique. If there's any class on this entire list that you've...
So, what's it? So with Illrigger and the Blood Hunter that comes afterward, I probably won't be able to give that good of an advice on how to achieve these similar effects with multiclassing, because like if these things were come up, if guys like Matt Colville and Matt Mercer came up with these things, I am not sure how closely you can replicate a similar vibe with multiclassing. Both of these subclasses, or I say subclasses, both of these homebrew classes were probably thought of playtested to an extreme extent. But that being said, I'm still gonna try. So with the Illrigger, it's not a class I'm actually familiar with, to be honest. I don't know what it's all about. And again, so I'm probably not going to be able to give that good of an advice into replicating it. But based on what he said here, I think it sounds to me like a 5e version of the anti-paladin that used to exist. And not Oathbreaker, by the way. It sounds like the closest thing to an anti-paladin. And for that, I think what you would like is the Oath of Conquest Paladin, or maybe any other Oath Paladin could work. But yeah, Oath of Conquest Paladin with Warlock. I'm not sure which subclass exactly. Look into it. But I think some kind of Hexadin or a padlock. Yeah, a Paladin Warlock or Paladin Hexblade should probably serve as an Illrigger good-ish enough. But again, like I said, I do not know enough about the Illrigger to give you a perfect idea. But I think Warlock Paladin would be a good alternative. Maybe you can add like a level of rogue for expertise in a few skills, or maybe just take the skill expert or prodigy feat if you are a human or half-elf. And if you're not a human or half-elf, the skill expert feat for extra expertise. Ranger first level might also work, but if you have the wisdom to spare for that, because that also gives you some expertise if you take the optional class features. So yeah, that is how I would tell you. That is how I would suggest you to try and make a Hell Knight, basically. A knight from Hell that serves demons and makes contracts. So Warlock Paladin, maybe Ranger splashed in. And now for the Blood Hunter.
Probably already heard of or possibly played with or as It'd be this one, the Blood Hunter. I mean, when one of the most creative minds in Dungeons and Dragons decides that he wants to put together his own class, people are going to want to see it and play it, and for very good reason. If you haven't already heard of Blood Hunters, they're the brainchild of Matthew Mercer and can be best described as somewhere between the blend of a blood magic Geralt of Rivia meets Van Helsing with a sprinkling of optional lycanthropy as well. I'll be very upfront in saying I'm a huge Witcher fan, always have been, always will be. Miss you already, Henry Cavill. And as a Witcher fan, I never thought I'd get the chance of experiencing a class anywhere close to that of my beloved Geralt, but Bloodhunters remarkably scratch that itch very well and then some. As a Blood Hunter, you're driven by your desire to destroy and rid the evils of the world, both old and new. Rings a couple of bells, doesn't it? Armed with the rites of secretive blood magic and a willingness to sacrifice your own vitality and humanity for your cause, you protect the realms from the shadows and monsters. What better way of fighting monsters than becoming a monster yourself? I mean, come on, lather some ointments on some swords and drop my voice by around 7 octaves and you've got an even cooler Witcher. As a Blood Hunter, you get access to use a feature called Blood Maledict, which allows you to cast blood curses, which range from dealing additional damage, stunning creatures, or even frightening them. When you cast Blood Maledict, you also have the additional option of amplifying the effects of this curse, which results in you taking necrotic damage as a consequence of this. You're quite literally trading blood for blood. And then at level 3 you'll get access to your Blood Hunter Order or subclasses, which include Order of the Ghost Slayer. This subclass primarily specializes in hunting the undead by giving you access to radiant damage on your weapons, or using your magic to help allies that are charmed, frightened, or possessed. Order of the Lycan, arguably the best one. This subclass gives you the ability to transform.
No. You're not going to say that. I looked into Blood Hunter actually a long time ago, and Order of the Lycan is probably the worst Blood Hunter subclass, arguably on par with original Beastmaster Ranger. And look, if I'm not here to yak your yam, but if you're gonna play Blood Hunter and you want Order of the Lycan, I will say that you are free to do that. It's a game about having fun. If that's fun for you, then go for it. And with how 5e is designed, as long as you don't multiclass, which I know is the whole point of this video, but if you don't multiclass, it's very, very hard to come up with a character. No, it's impossible to come up with a character that is bad, you know? Even the worst class with the worst subclasses, unless you rolled absolutely abysmally for your stats, unless you put your stats like an idiot, you should be fine. It doesn't matter what your class is, it doesn't matter what your subclass is. As long as you have decent-ish enough stats in some key, decent enough numbers in some key stats, you are fine. You will be fine. You won't be so weak that you're lagging behind everyone else. That is if you don't multiclass. The thing about multiclass is that you can combo classes together to create builds that are more powerful than any single class alone. But if you fuck up multiclassing, you can end up with an absolute disaster of a character. See Absurd, and who was a multiclass that had like 1 or 2 levels in every class. 1 level in every class. That was Absurd. And that was a busted character in a very, very bad way. So yeah, if you don't multiclass, you can, and you probably don't have to worry about being too weak. I'll just say that. And I do believe, since Matt Mercer fucking made Blood Hunter, I do believe the same can be said about Blood Hunter and even Order of the Lycan. But that's aside, mechanically speaking, I would say Order of the Lycan is the most dumbest subclass out of all of them. Not from a conceptual way. Conceptually, it's really cool. I actually have a character that is basically the Order of a Lycan, a werewolf character that is a werewolf and uses her werewolfness to fight monsters. So it's basically an Order of the Lycan Blood Hunter. But I looked at the Blood Hunter subclass and went like, yeah, nah, fam, that's not what I want. I am not playing that. And so I used a different multi-class for my werewolves character, but regardless, as so with Blood Hunter, I just wanted to rant a bit about the Order of the Lycan. Let me just finish this section first.
Form into a bestial form. Geralt of Rivia meets Van Helsing meets Werebear? Please, play as a blood hunter. Order of the Mutant. This subclass specializes in brewing special potions called the mutagens. Interesting. Geralt. And finally, Order of the Profane Soul, which kind of just gives you a patron and you kind of function very similarly to a warlock with the Blood Hunter features, so it's kind of an unofficial supported multi-class as a subclass, so cool. It might seem like I'm a little bit not in favor of how similar this is to The Witcher, but I am so here for this. I'm also really optimistic and hopeful that this will be adapted to the new player's handbook to see how it could potentially be improved with some of the updates they've made, but we'll see what happens. I like a few of the early...
So, with Blood Hunter, it's more... I've not played Witcher, so again, just like with Ilrigar, my advice for playing a Blood Hunter would be like, I won't be that good, I guess. Won't be that accurate. Good is subjective. Accurate, yeah. It won't be super accurate, but as a kind of monster hunter, dark or gothic monster hunter type class, if you wanted to play something like that, I would have suggested, again, mixing Warlock into the mix, because Warlock is an awesome class. Can you tell I'm biased towards Warlock? Fighter and Warlock, they are my favorite classes. And speaking of, I think with Blood Hunter, you may actually want Ranger here. I would say to look into some of the Ranger subclasses, especially with the recent updates Ranger has gotten. And I would ask you to look into Ranger a bit to see what that gives you. And combine that with Cleric, I would say, because again, wisdom. Alternatively, you could also do something weird and just take support spells from Ranger that don't really impose, don't really need to hit rolls or need saving throws, and just work. So that way you can keep your wisdom at a bare minimum and use your actual damage dealing spells from Warlock and Paladin. So either Ranger Cleric, Ranger Warlock, or Ranger Paladin. I'd tell you to look into these classes, or maybe a different mix that I'm not thinking about. Yeah, so look into these four classes: Paladin, Cleric, Warlock, Ranger. Maybe even look into Fighter a bit, but I don't think that's that good of an idea. So that's how I would suggest if you wanted to play a Gothic Hunter type character.
Earlier mentioned subclasses, there's also a fair few variants of shamans available throughout the D&D community, but my absolute favourite, and I feel the most on theme flavour-wise and mechanically, is Patty Cake's version. Patty Cake is such a cool username, good for you. I just personally find it to be the most balanced implementation of shamanism and shaman powers from other fantasy or cultures into the D&D setting. But of course, for those who aren't all that familiar, let's dive into the spiritual world of shamanism. With this interpretation of shamans, they gain their magical prowess directly from the spirits around them. Often, shamans harbour a deep respect for the dead and see their gifts as an obligation to help the spirits move on, with many using their powers for the living as well. This is either through restorative forces to help or wrathful forces enacting revenge. For example, at second level you get access to a class feature called Sixth Sense, which allows you to become aware if any creatures have died in a 30-foot area around you in the past day. You don't actually get to know how they died, but you do know what type of creature they were, so humanoid, beast, monstrosity, and you have advantage on charisma checks when trying to speak to that spirit as well. Also at second level, you'll gain access to summon a spirit animal, which mechanically just acts as a much more durable, proficient, and overall useful familiar at the cost of a point of exhaustion. And I think that makes sense. Gaining the companionship of a dead spirit who is going to accompany you potentially for the rest of your days would be rather exhausting. Additionally, when you choose your spirit animal, they get 2 spirit boons, which are essentially additional added features that they can offer, such as giving the help action, giving your party members advantage on death saves, or even gaining additional movement speed. Also, as you get higher level, your spirit animal gets access to even more of these boons, which is really cool. I mean, not to get too derailed, but spirit animals get almost cooler than ranger pets, and it's not even a pet-focused class. How are rangers not this cool? You have pets! Although there aren't nearly as many options as some of the other classes we've already discussed, I feel the 2 subclass options that you do have are very on brand with the driving principles of shamanism, in that you'll either be on a journey of harmony or a journey of wrath. If you do choose to go down the journey of harmony, your spirit animal gets a lot more supportive abilities, like the ability to add temporary hit points, heal your party members, and other supportive features as well. Whereas if you go down the journey of wrath, this is much more focused on being offensive, giving you proficiency in martial weapons, extra attacks. There's a couple of features as well that make your spirit animal a bit more aggressive. One thing that I am thoroughly impressed with within this shaman class is just how strong the flavor persists up until max level. Take this for example. At 17th level, you no longer require food or water to sustain your mortal body, and you no longer age because you're now so far beyond that. Even more so at max level, you can now see and sense both the physical and spiritual planes simultaneously, and the true natures of all creatures within these realms are revealed to you, meaning you can see their alignments. And you have unlimited uses of your sixth sense ability, so talk to all the spirits you want. You truly become one with the spirits, and it's rather beautiful. Imagine playing with the...
So with shaman, this is another one that's harder to do. But as a ghost whisperer, basically someone who talks to ghosts, gets powers from the dead, and has magic that can, I don't know, do offense or defensive stuff. I think what you want here is probably a grave cleric, or yeah, I'd say look into some mix of grave cleric, like soul knife rogue. Soul knife rogue. No, 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 no. Not phantom rogue. Yeah, phantom rogue, because I think the phantom rogue does have some spiritual thing, but it's more like not that respectful to the dead. To the dead. Wasn't there a, hold on? Wasn't there a spell that lets you talk to undead? Speak with dead. Yeah, that's a cleric spell, isn't it? Bard cleric. So yeah, it's a cleric spell. So I guess with the shaman, you do want to lean more into cleric. Maybe look into druid a bit as well, because based on what kind of shaman you are trying to play, a druid might work very well for that. So yeah, look into clerics and druids. Maybe ranger, but I don't really think ranger is a good fit for this. So what does cleric actually get? Does cleric actually get anything that lets them see ghosts? I don't think so. I can't remember anything. If anything is going to get it, it's going to be grave domain. Circle of mortality. Eyes of the grave. Oh, interesting. Well, it's not ghosts, it's undead, but I guess ghosts can be undead. So yeah, try the grave domain cleric, and possibly some druid as well if you want to play a shaman. See what class features you can, and I don't know, reflavor into those. The last three I've not been very good at.
intellectually advanced mind of a wizard, but without the spellcasting ability. Actually, wait, no, I've made that sound way more boring than it actually is. Imagine playing as a not stupid barbarian. That that's also actually setting the bar pretty low. I'll just get to the point. AM Black Scholar class is one of the most unique and new approaches to a D&D class that I've ever experienced, in the form of an intellectual-based martial class. So, rather than just needlessly doing this multiple times per turn because there's already too many classes that do that, the Scholar more so fills the supportive martial fighter role in combat as well as out-of-combat roleplay situations as well. They primarily do this through their own unique maneuvers which can be used in either situation. A few of these maneuvers include healing a creature, gaining advantage on a perception or investigation check, or doing a distracting strike which gives your allies advantage on their next attack on that creature. Even more importantly to the playstyle of a Scholar are these features called Discoveries, which are essentially different buffs Scholars can learn and swap out as they level up. Some of these discoveries range from gaining additional proficiencies in different languages, using your intelligence modifier in place of a lot of other modifiers, or even learning a little bit of magic. I've genuinely been amazed both times I've played as and with another Scholar and how fun and interesting a support martial character can be. It's really made that entire role feel glaringly absent in the base classes, which I know I've already touched on, but once you experience it, you kind of go, well, yeah, that just makes sense. Also, similar to the Blood Hunter, it's another one I'm incredibly excited and optimistic to see adapted to the new PHB rule set, so fingers crossed for that as well. If you've stuck it out this long, I appreciate the heck out of you, and thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to me talk about something I'm incredibly passionate about. If you do want to check out any of the D&D classes I've just spoken about, be sure to check out the links in my description, and if you do think there's any glaring omissions from what I've just talked through that you think I need to go out there and try and experience, let me know in the comments. I'm always keen to go and play new things. And if you do manage to go out there and try one of these classes, be sure to let me know about it. I'm so excited to hear your stories. Until next time, happy homebrewing.
Okay, so that's that video, and the last one, the Scholar. I think I know how I can kind of do that. So let's say the Scholar, from the sounds of it, sounds like basically a defensive support martial character that uses wits to fight instead of wits and intelligence to fight instead of like brute forcing it. So for that, there are a few classes and subclasses that you want from it. Firstly, I would say you want to look into Paladin a bit more. A lot of Paladin's base abilities, especially the level 6 aura, can be good support options. The aura of protection specifically, and extra attack is always good to have. But there's Paladin, it gives you some healing but not as much healing as a cleric. Like you have Paladin with the aura of protection. You also have another option here for a support martial character, which is the Cavalier Fighter. And if you want to be a more like tech savvy fighter, I say tech as in technique, not as in technology. If you want to be a more technique savvy fighter, there's always Battlemaster, and Battlemaster does have some support options, so look into fighter as well. But the class that I think most of is Rogue. Rogue sneak attack is, I said it before, I'm not sure if I said it on video, but I have said it before auto with my other D&D groups, and I'll say it again. Sneak attack is probably the most misleading name in all of D&D. You don't need to sneak attack, which means that's Sherlock Holmes style fighting, where you're striking at pressure points or vital organs to deal extreme amounts of damage, to basically bring an opponent down to their knees in one hit. That is sneak attack. So what you want here is Rogue, and based on what kind of support abilities you want, I'd suggest picking a Rogue subclass based on that, and potentially multiclassing with Paladin or Fighter here. Again, what levels you want from each, that would base entirely on what kind of idea you have when you think of a martial oriented fighter. Honestly, thinking about it, the mercenary class I talked about the start of the video can actually probably make for a good Scholar build. Arcade Trickster 7 and a Life Cleric 2 and Fighter 1. That actually might not be a bad substitute for a Scholar or a support martial. So yeah, there you go. That would be my way of doing these kinds of themes as a character if I wasn't allowed homebrew. Of course, you can always disregard everything I said in this video and just go to, what's the channel name again? Arlen Tricks. Yeah, go to Arlen Tricks video. I'm leaving the video link in the description below. Go to his video. Here's the link to all the classes. Click on those and see what suits your fancy. And yeah, I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling kind of sick, not because of this video or anything, because I am again not physically that well right now. I've got a cold. I am taking medicine. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna end it here. I hope my video was also helpful as well as his video. Leave a like to his video. Maybe check out to see if you like his style of D&D content. And yeah, I'm Zulkares and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.